Hi, I'm Erica Lukes, and this is Expanding Frontiers. You can visit us at expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out our latest work. I'm here with my partner at Expanding Frontiers, Jack Brewer. Welcome this afternoon, Jack, to the show.
Thank you.
Absolutely. And we are thrilled to be here with Lesley Carhart, who is AKA Hacks for Pancakes. She is the principal incident responder and threat analyst at an industrial cybersecurity company called Dragos. They were described as one of the top 10 influencers in cybersecurity in 2019 through 2020 by Global Data Research. They are involved with and comment on a broad range of cybersecurity topics, including industrial control systems, remote working, multi-factor authentication, and also the 2021 Microsoft Exchange Server data breach. There's so much more that we have to talk about, including a career in the Air Force Reserve. We're going to be talking about that. But Lesley, thank you for joining us in your busy schedule. We really appreciate your time today.
Thank you so much for having me.
Absolutely. And I've got to say that you were Hacker of the Year at DEF CON.
I was, yes,
That's
community awarded. So that's
that
a
is
little feather
amazing.
in my cap. It made me very happy.
That is great. Thank you.
What kind of things led to that award, Lesley? What kind of activities were you doing?
I wish I could say it was because I was doing amazing hacking, getting bug bounties, things like that. And I definitely have a career in cybersecurity, but I've won a lot of my lifetime achievement awards and community awards because I do a ton of mentorship and outreach and community work to support, especially newcomers to the field and young people who are trying to get into cybersecurity.
I see. And as a longtime follower of Hacks for Pancakes on social media, yeah, I feel like I'm talking to a celebrity here. You're popular at the conventions, you do online remote events. Tell us what led you into this kind of work and what does a day at work look like for Lesley Carhart?
So I had one of those stereotypical routes into cybersecurity that isn't stereotypical at all and probably is not reflective of anything that people do today. I was that kid who got a computer at 7 years old and learned how to program and got a job at 15 as a programmer. And of course, it wasn't all roses and perfection. I was in the dot-com bubble burst, and we're like in the third recession I've been through in my millennial life right now. But I ended up having no choice at that point but to enlist, and I joined the Air Force. I fixed aircraft computers for a while. I got a degree in electronics and then in network engineering. So I've been all over the place. I've had an interesting, more hardware-based route into cybersecurity. And honestly, I had a hard time making it into cybersecurity at the time. It was very challenging if you didn't look like the in crowd, if you didn't, go to the same places, if you weren't part of the club. It was very hard to break into cybersecurity. And that's one of the reasons why I focus so heavily on getting newcomers into the field and making it accessible and breaking through gatekeeping, because I had no help getting in, and it took me a very long time and a lot of hard work to get to where I'm at. In terms of my daily job, though, what do I do today? It's kind of crazy as well. I am one of the few people on planet Earth who responds to hacking and intrusions into industrial facilities. So I'm talking about critical infrastructure environments like power plants, water treatment plants, manufacturing, transportation, trains, aircraft, et cetera. So there's kinds of like industrial control system environments, SCADA environments, et cetera. That's where my company specializes at Dragos, and that's where I focus my incident response and forensics efforts.
Wow. And
I
so can you
see.
tell us when you first got involved and you figured out that this is your path and what you wanted to do, what were some of the things that you really honed in on? What were your passions? And then what were some of the kind of the pitfalls? You mentioned that it was very hard to break through that bubble, but what else was a hindrance early on in your career?
I was always interested in forensics and digital forensics since it became a field and a practical field in the 1990s. Everybody argues about the dates on there with me online. There was like one book on digital forensics when I started getting interested in the 90s. There was some coverage in the paper print magazines like Popular Electronics, and There just really wasn't a lot out there. Was there a couple courses out there? Yes, there was a couple classes on hard drive, dead box forensics, and that was it. And you had to have a lot of money and resources to break in, or you had to know somebody because the software and tools involved were so prohibitively expensive at the time that they weren't accessible to the general community. Of course, there was no YouTube, no podcast then. You had to buy a couple of books and you had to get your hands on the tools somehow. And it was tremendously difficult. And nobody was willing to take a chance on me. So I had to do a lot of self-study and I had to fight my way into the career field.
Congratulations for doing that. I'm sure that was a tough battle, but it is very, very cool that you are taking the time to mentor people. I've noticed in some of your social media posts that you're also calling for other people to step up and to mentor younger people getting into this subject. I mean, there are lots of risks involved. I would imagine this would be a very intense line of work. And so that's great that you are encouraging people to do great things with this.
I see a lot of young people who are having tremendous challenges getting in again. You know, it goes in waves. Like I said, this is like my third terrible job market that I've been through as a millennial. And I hate seeing the young people today go through what we went through in like 2007, 2008. It's a really hard time to be trying to get into any field, and technical fields are certainly no exception, especially because they're oversaturated because everybody tried to get into software engineering about 8 years ago, and everybody tried to get into cybersecurity about 4 or 5 years ago. And those graduates are now getting out. The market is oversaturated, and it's extremely challenging for young people to get in. And there's certainly demand at senior levels now, but it's very hard to break into the field. And I spend a day a week doing mentorship online with people. I run career clinics, and I don't know how recruiters do this every day. I talked to our recruiter today. I was like, I don't know how you do this because it's just like one catastrophic, heartbreaking story after another right now, after these people have been sold incredibly expensive degrees, certification programs, et cetera, boot camps, and they cannot find a job.
Wow.
Mm.
And that's unfortunate. I mean, are you seeing a lot of like malfeasance with regard to that? I mean, people that are paying exorbitant amounts of fees to get degrees or to get certifications that are really being taken advantage of.
Absolutely. Whenever there's a hot market for a job, whenever it's the trendy thing, right now it's AI. 4 years ago, it was cybersecurity. There's always going to be untrustworthy, unethical training organizations out there that try to jump on that and sell, oh, you'll have a perfect golden career for the rest of your life to people. It's happening right now with AI. And it happened with cybersecurity, it happened with programming, software engineering. This goes in cycle. Whatever the hot topic of the day is, educational institutions jump on that. And there's a lot of legitimate university programs and certification firms that do cybersecurity training. I'm certainly not saying there aren't. There's very good programs out there. I'm tied into educational institutions. I'm a certification trainer. But there are, of course, in that space, plenty of unscrupulous schools who don't have good programs and promise the moon when that's not a real possibility, as well as especially a large number of untrustworthy boot camps and online training institutions that definitely don't set people up for success. So it's infuriating. We've tried to bring attention to them as a cybersecurity community, but they keep cropping up and young people keep being victimized by them. And that's a reason why we really need strong mentors out there as senior cybersecurity people, so we can vet those educational institutions for people. It's more critical than ever to not go into debt for an organization that really isn't going to help you get a job or promises you things that are not possible.
And I have to ask you too, because there's so many, I would imagine that people would want to recruit you or somebody young in this subject because of nefarious things going on. What are some of the things that younger people who want a career in this, what do they need to be aware of as far as the landscape?
Wow, what does a young person need to be aware of? How can I summarize this quickly?
I know. I did.
First of all, what you need to know long term when you're looking at educational programs, you're looking at personal training, self-study. To be good long term at cybersecurity, what you need to learn how to do is think critically. You need to learn good computer fundamentals. So how do computers work? How do networks work? How do people administer computers. Things you learn in like a help desk, systems administration, some basic computer science, some basic network engineering. That's the stuff that doesn't go away. If you go get a kind of shady degree in cybersecurity, like especially master's degree right now in cybersecurity, they can be really dicey. A lot of what they do is teach you the new cool whiz-bang tools and how to use those. And those age out really fast. Attack paths that adversaries use age out really fast. The tools that you use to defend age out really fast. What doesn't go away is how computers fundamentally work, how networks work, being able to think through problems. And I'm seeing a lot of these less reputable programs not teaching those critical thinking and fundamental skills. And that's really where you need to focus to succeed, because the space that we're in cybersecurity is branching out and changing continuously all the time. Attackers move fast. We have to move fast too. And you have to be able to think creatively about these problems. Computers are good at detecting computers. When we're talking about, like, everybody's asked, the elephant in the room is artificial intelligence and LLMs and things like that. And is the cybersecurity space going to be lost to AI? Computers are good at detecting computer stuff. So adversaries use AI, ML tools. They use automated malware, things like that. Computerized tools like ML are good at detecting that stuff and automating detection of that. So we've seen a lot of malware detection and hacking tool detection taken over by automated systems, which is great because computers are good at detecting computer patterns. But the adaptation there from the bad people has been to do very tremendously living off the land, human-fronted techniques. So getting human beings into systems and doing novel, weird, new things so that the computers can't detect them. And that's where you have to have human beings, and they have to be adapting to what those adversaries change in their tactics every single week. And that's not going to change. Computers will continue to advance in their attacks. Defenders will continue to advance their computers in detecting computerized attacks, but human beings will always be unpredictable. They will always do new and novel things, and defenders have to be able to adapt to those changes in thinking by human attackers. That's going to continue to be the case. But if they're just teaching you how to type in things and run Metasploit or run Cobalt Strike, that's going to go away in a couple of years. And I see that continually in those degree programs. I see people who graduate and they don't keep up with the space. They expect to get a job 2 years later and all their skills are out of date.
I would imagine that would just happen very, very quickly, like you're saying. I mean, you just constantly needing to educate yourself and understand the threat landscape. Jack, do you have any questions? I'm sorry, I feel like I could just keep asking
I was going to
questions.
say, as a layperson, it sounds like young people and fresh eyes would have built-in advantages where sometimes the longer term professionals would be set in their ways and not as quick, like think they have something in place and there's that. Does that happen sometimes, that the fresh eyes can actually be advantageous, that they're not experienced at
Am I
some
am
of
I
this stuff?
am I allowed to say the D word anymore, the diversity word?
Yes, please.
People anymore. Diversity is really important in cybersecurity because attackers are coming from different countries. They're coming from different backgrounds. They're thinking of new novel techniques, and having young people who are new and fresh to the field and thinking about technology in a different way. Having people who come from military backgrounds, people who come from different countries, people who come from different economic backgrounds, is all those things lend to be able to defend against different attackers who are coming from different perspectives and changing up their techniques all the time. So yes, the short answer to that is yes. Young people can bring a tremendously different perspective on the threat landscape and adversaries because they're used to using technology in different ways. They've grown up with tablets and smartphones as their primary computing devices. They don't think about PCs as being a necessary computing device in a lot of cases. Their threat model is different, and they think about threats and adversaries, scams, et cetera, in different ways. Of course, it's beneficial to bring new talent into the space because we think about computers in our different generations, millennials, Gen X, boomers, et cetera. Like, we all think about using computers in different ways. So all of our perspectives are really necessary to defend against adversaries that bridge all those generations.
Sometimes too, the other side of the coin can be that An older person might resist some of the new stuff just because we don't know how it works. I don't know how it works. And we'll be assured by the manufacturers and the younger people that it's just an unreasonable paranoia. And one of the things I really appreciated about your social media a few years back was just intuitively don't like smart houses and locks and things like that. And I saw you giving that some validity, that there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. And that I appreciated that then it takes it out of me just having a bad feeling and actually gave it validity. So, like, what are some of the things that as consumers, as lay people, we should have concerns about?
You need to be aware of your threat model. And that's true for physical life and for digital life. But as more of our lives become digital, because we've got a smartphone in our pocket, we've got a house full of devices, smart devices, home appliances with network connections, everything is digital now. So when I'm talking about your threat model, it's personal to you and your family. Everybody faces different actual threats. I'm talking about motive, means, and opportunity. So somebody who's divorced has a very different threat model than somebody who's happily married. Somebody who travels abroad a lot has a very different threat model than somebody who stays in their hometown. The crime in your area dictates your threat model. The sensitivity of your job position dictates your threat model. The people who are specifically targeting you and your family and your employer dictate your threat model. And so people's threat model can vary from neighbor to neighbor in the same building. You have to be aware of your threat model and how it changes over time. Your threat model today in your house is very different than your threat model if you decide to take a vacation somewhere where pickpocketing is a big problem. So talking about physical threat model, sensible people do that all the time. Like you change how you carry your wallet or what bag you carry based on your current threat model. So people understand that. They think about those things, hopefully, as they're traveling, as they're getting new jobs, as their life situation, the people who may wish them ill change over time. We all do that. What we don't think about necessarily so much is our digital threat model and how our digital devices are impacted by our threat model. And what happened in that case, you can go watch my talk at B-Sides Kansas City, your own cyberpunk dystopia. It's out there still about, I was in an apartment building and they installed this elaborate smart apartment system where your landlord could pretty much view your use of your door and your thermostat and all the stuff that you did in your home. And they did that because it was a good convenience sell, but mostly because they could collect a lot of data about how their apartments were used. It was a good tool for them to control access to the apartments and monitor how they were used. And the problem with it was it was tremendously insecure at the time, as these were early deployments of those systems, and they were tremendously insecure. And thinking about threat modeling, again, everybody's threat modeling is unique. My threat model as a person who has had stalkers, who does a very sensitive job, my consideration of my data about when I was home, potential access to my apartment, how to get into it, was very different than maybe my neighbor who's only concerned with casual thieves. It was very different from my neighbor who had just gone through a nasty divorce with an abusive spouse. So thinking about potential of somebody to be able to use that system to get into an apartment without there being any record, open the door, open the lock without there being any record of that, a big deal to some of those threat models, less of a big deal to others. Somebody being able to know when you were home and not home, having that logged on a routine basis. Again, part of a threat model for some people, not part of a threat model for others. But from my perspective, it was a big deal that that data was being recorded for everybody across this entire apartment complex and apartment business. And so I approached it as a security researcher, and I brought that to the attention of through responsible disclosure of the apartment building. And it was a horrible debacle. It was a really big mess. They did not want to hear from me, but in the end, I think I made some positive changes. Those systems have been improved over time, but we have to remain vigilant about our threat model and the digital devices that we have and what data they collect about us, what can be stolen, and how that is impacted by what we're concerned about as individuals, as things that could be dangerous to us.
That's great. I mean, and the different, threat narratives. I mean, an abusive spouse, you with your security concerns and being stalked and everything. I just think people aren't aware of what how they should be really dealing with threats in their environment, whether it's online or in a physical space. But those are great ideas and tips. What are some of the things, because now all we want to do is put the greatest new app on the phone, or we're doing things, especially some of us who are a little bit older, where we are potentially putting us up in a security risk or risk to be hacked. What things can we do to make sure that we are kind of paring down what we're really using on our phones or on our computers so we're safe?
Some operating systems like iOS try to tell you what permissions apps have, and it's important to understand what those data access permissions are. Can the app access your camera? What date can it access all your contacts? Can it send messages on your behalf? What can it see about you? What data is it collecting? That's really important. And again, first of all, start with your threat model, just from a physical perspective. Who really wishes you harm? Are there criminals out there who might want to steal your data? Are you worried about credit card theft? Everybody should be worried about that type of personal data theft. What are your personal threat model concerns? And then think about, from a digital device perspective, what data could lend itself to somebody abusing your access, your personal threat model. So if you're worried about an abusive spouse, the digital data concerns are going to be very different. You're going to be worried about somebody figuring out your location. You're going to be worried about somebody reading your messages. You're going to be worried about potentially access to things like your car, your house, if you've got smart devices, smart locks, remote start on your car. When you have those concerns, your primary concern is going to be making sure that nobody has, over ambitious access to that data on your phone. And you're going to have to watch your app usage and your remote access to your devices very, very carefully. If you're concerned about general theft, I mean, you're thinking more about your financial data. Where does that sit? Where does it live? Is there multi-factor authentication on it? If that's your primary concern, then you want to build bastions around that in your digital devices. And so the best bet is really be cognizant. Be cognizant of your threat model. Be cognizant of what your devices have access to, what is on your computer, what is accessible from your apps, what is accessible from your email accounts, etc. And then if you have questions about what that means, seek out somebody who can help you, give you guidance on what that actually means to you. If you're seeing that an app has access to all your photos and you're kind of concerned about that, please ask somebody. Talk to somebody who's more savvy in computers and cybersecurity about what that actually means, what the implications of that are. Because again, you've got to think about it. It's just like you're planning to stay in a hotel in a kind of shady place. The internet's risky now. If you were in a motel in a untrustworthy town, you might, want to be in a second story. You might want to have an inside door. You might deadbolt it and also put a door jamb in. You might, make sure you check with the front desk before you let anybody into your room. So all those considerations you'd put into being in kind of an untrustworthy physical space, like carrying your passport inside your clothes in a foreign country. It's the same equivalent in digital technology. And if you aren't sure what the implications of having an app, having an account, having different layers of authentication in your accounts are, please ask somebody. Please ask how that pertains to your personal risk.
Thank you very much, because a lot of people, my friends, family members, they don't have really that expertise, and
Yeah.
as a result, people get into a lot of bad situations. So I appreciate that advice.
They don't know they need it. I mean, that's what I'm sitting here thinking is people of all ages don't make that threat assessment and aren't aware that the data being taken could be used in certain ways it can be used. Like I'm generally of the opinion, Lesley, that honest people don't worry as much about dishonest people as perhaps they should, because they're just not thinking in those dimensions. And gosh, I'm sure you're familiar with it. We see people wanting to sell or give away apps for phones that or to report one recreational thing or another, or do this and that, that won't even give the information of who runs the company. Like won't even let you know what the members of the board of directors are, and what concerns they represent and things like that. And I know people are just generally like, well, what the heck? I mean, it's just something on my phone. And so I really appreciate you explaining what that can mean. What what other types of things, as you talk at conferences and your virtual events, that we might not even know to ask you about, are the types of things that lay people and concerned citizens should think about with their personal information and online activity?
So the first thing that I want everybody to understand is that cybercrime is a massive $1 trillion industry today. It is a company. It's not, yes, there's young kids who do it out of their basement. Yes, that still happens. And that is a problem. But the bulk of the ransoms and the phishing and the exploitation, extortion, things like that on the internet, the scam messages you get are very well organized multinational businesses now. They have a profit margin, they have managers, they have HR, they have payroll departments. They are huge institutions. So that's who you're up against. Now the good part of that is they have a budget, and they have a bottom line, and they have a goal for how much they're going to make each day. So even their individual agents, who are often low-level people who aren't incredibly well trained on technology themselves, are given a quota for how many people they have to scam each day, how much money they have to make. And what that means is if you make yourself a hard target, if you are a deterrent, if you make their lives hard, oftentimes they'll move on to the next person because it's not worth their hours and their minutes on their time card to target you. That's why you see a lot of scams that are horribly poorly spelled, like 419 scams, like phishing emails, texts, things like that. They're obvious scams to a lot of people because they want really soft targets who they can get a lot of really quickly. They want to make a lot of money as quickly as possible. So even if you're still, not sure if things are scams or not, there's some deterrent things that you can do that are relatively lightweight, that really make the bad people's lives hard and can really, really effectively make them choose a different target. The first one in that is use a password manager. Use a reputable password manager from a legitimate company. And when I'm talking about a password manager, I'm talking about a piece of software, usually on your phone or in the cloud, that can be used across multiple devices, that stores all your passwords for you. And every time you make a new account, it makes you this really long, strong password for it, and it handles putting it into the password box for you. So you have one password that opens up this account, and it handles all of your other passwords in a really strong, hard to hack way for you. So you don't have to reuse passwords between your different accounts. You don't have to remember them. You don't have to put them in a little book. It does that all for you. Strong passwords are a big deterrent. The way a lot of hackers break into accounts is they steal your password one place and then they try it on every other website in the world under your email address. And they do that very rapidly. So if you're reusing passwords or you have really weak passwords that everybody uses, it's very quick and easy for them to break into your various accounts, even your banking, things like that. So password manager is my number one tip to start with. Use a password manager. The second tip is use multi-factor authentication or dual factor authentication. They use different words for it in different places. That means that little code you get on your phone when you log in. A lot of sites now require it, at least a text message or a code sent to your email. The best bet is to install a multi-factor authentication app on your phone. There's a number of reputable ones out there, including ones from Microsoft. And what they do is they show you the code on a little app on your screen, and you can just type it in when you log in. It's really easy to do. All you have to do is open up the phone and type in a little 6-digit code to log into your email or log into your bank or log into your financial institutions where you do your investment. all those sensitive things, I would try to get multi-factor authentication on and use an app on your phone, preferably if you can. Those two things I mentioned, the password manager and the multi-factor authentication app, those two things are such huge deterrents. I can't give you a percentile, a great number of these corporate type adversaries, if they hit those roadblocks and you've used them well, are just going to move on to somebody else. They will protect you if you click on a phishing email. They will help you protect your accounts if there's, exploitation of one of those sites so that it doesn't spread to your other services. Those are two places you can really, really start.
Very cool. Thank you. Thank you. And I wanted to ask you, because this is very fascinating to me, to learn about some of the things that you are working on. I mean, you're dealing with life and death situations when you are doing the work that you're doing. What are ways that we are potentially vulnerable with our critical infrastructure, and how are you working to combat that?
Oh, so critical infrastructure is a completely different space. There's a lot of misunderstandings about the space that I work in, which is a big problem. It's one of the biggest challenges we're facing in securing things like oil and gas and manufacturing and the power grid and things like that. And one of those is that, first of all, what's being targeted and what's really scary in our society. And everybody thinks about the power grid first. There's always the people who are like, oh, so and so, what country is going to take down the US power grid? First of all, the United States power grid is in the continental United States is three grids, three discrete grids, and they are a patchwork of different providers and different operators across different technologies. It's actually kind of amazing that it all works together as it is. And so there's not one grid, and it is quite resilient. There's certainly threats that we're defending against, that we're concerned about there, but we're not particularly concerned about somebody taking down the entire United States. A city would be damaging enough. In terms of what really keeps us up at night, though, in my space, it's water and sewage for the most part. Those are mostly municipal utilities. They are incredibly impactful to society, and they're like one or two people working there. So they don't have like big cybersecurity teams defending them or a big budget. And the thing is that I've noticed as I've been working in this space for a while is that people can think about the power going out. Okay, so we've all been through a power outage in the United States, UK, Australia, similar developed nations. Like, that's something that we have actually seen fail in our lifetimes. And we know how to deal with it. Like, it sucks, but like a few hours power outage, you just don't open your refrigerator, you maybe throw some food out afterwards, and things come back online and you're okay. We are not used to the power going down for weeks. We are not used to interruptions to our other vital utility services, like the sewage treatment not working, like the toilet not flushing, like sewage backing up in your toilet. That is something that happens to us much more rarely. And when it happens, it's a massive deal and people respond really fast. With exceptions, certainly in certain places in the United States and certain economic levels. Water coming out of the pipes, having drinkable water coming out of the pipes. That is not an expected thing everywhere in the world. But in the United States, again, UK, Australia, in most of the developed metropolitan areas, that's like something you expect. You don't think about it being a possibility that you wouldn't have water or you wouldn't have drinkable water for an extended period of time. So that's another misunderstanding, is that, yes, we're concerned about power, but please stop talking just about power. Like, there's other critical services that we are not equipped to live without in industrialized nations. So that's some misunderstandings. There's a lot of misunderstandings about what's really going on in the attack surface too. And it's either that everything's an advanced cyber attack against utilities and the critical infrastructure, or that nothing is. Mm-hmm. And it's really, in reality, it's somewhere in between. So there's the people who are like, every time something breaks in an industrial space or the power goes out, somebody jumps to like, oh, it's a cyber attack. And we've had some ludicrous stories come out of that. 99% of the time, more than 99% of the time, it's maintenance or it's human error, things like that have always caused industrial accidents, industrial outages, things like that. But there is a meaningful percentage that is cyber attacks. And there's a crowd of people who are like, oh, there's nothing really happening. And I do this full time. This is my team's job, is responding to cyber attacks on critical infrastructure. A lot of them don't like the news because there's massive NDAs and people don't want to talk about it happening. It's terrifying to the population. And there's certainly been cases where various organizations have suppressed stories because they thought it would induce panic. But yeah, there are definitely impactful, both purposeful and not purposeful cyber intrusions that have had significant, dangerous, life-impacting effects on critical infrastructure. So both are true. You know, it's a mix. Like, it's not everything is a cyber attack, and there are things that are cyber attacks out there. It's a combination of both in reality.
Okay, thank you very much. I appreciate that.
What I've just got to tell you, what you're describing also sounds to me like a lot of what I'm reading and watching is currently happening from the Oval Office. I will leave it up to you to what extent you might like to comment or pass for now as you continue to assess the situation and how much it might affect you professionally as compared to just an interested citizen. But do you want to discuss any of that at all?
Ooh, I will leave it at this. Everything is political, including cybersecurity. We have a wide bank of adversaries, especially state adversaries, and also criminal adversaries that we are dealing with daily as a nation. We have a threat model as a country too, and as various national institutions, and that threat model changes all the time. As good cyber threat intelligence people who are looking at how states are going to attack us, how they're embedding for future attacks, how they're conducting reconnaissance for future attacks, a lot of that hinges on the actions of our nation and our political moves and who we're friendly with and who we're not friendly with and who might want to launch conventional warfare with us in the future. That all impacts our cybersecurity threat model as a country, especially in our critical infrastructure. And I would implore informed citizens to be concerned about that. Adversaries are pre-positioning for attacks in our critical infrastructure. They have been for a long time. And that's only going to increase. We've seen the barrier to entry to doing that decreasing over time. Losing cyber talent in the government, losing ability to respond to those embedded attacks and those embedded adversaries is very dangerous. Adversaries have worked hard to have the capacity to do very, very bad things to our infrastructure. And we need to continue to be aware of those adversaries, no matter who thinks we're friendly with this week. We need to continue to prepare to defend our infrastructure against those attacks as it becomes more and more digitized.
And it's constant, right? I mean, that's already a given.
Yeah. It's this is real stuff that's really happening. And the sad thing is things like reconnaissance and espionage don't build security budgets. They oftentimes don't even make the news. The story about the United States telecommunication infrastructure having embedding in it was notable because a lot of similar situations haven't been covered in great detail at all outside of cybersecurity circles. That type of embedding, adversaries, especially state adversaries, building long-term footholds and collecting long-term reconnaissance about our critical infrastructure is a real thing that is happening. It isn't making anything explode, so sometimes it doesn't draw news attention. Sometimes people really don't care at an executive leadership level. But the problem is that means that they are pre-staging to easily conduct future attacks, to steal data on U.S. operations and U.S. citizens, and ultimately be able to do real life impacts to our country. So defending our infrastructure and kicking out those embedded groups is really, really crucial. Being aware of them being there is really, really crucial. And the teams and the intelligence experts who are tracking those groups are essential to our national security to make sure that we're not tremendously vulnerable against those types of attacks in the future.
And so let me ask you, when we've got with the DEI situation going on and when people are going in, DOGE, They're going into records and looking for specific keywords that they want to eliminate. What effect does that have? And obviously, there are bigger implications than that we aren't aware of. Can you walk us through some of that?
Be tremendously careful taking a hammer to a glass window. Our government is infinitely complex. It is an immense bureaucratic engine in the United States. And there are a multitude of teams of intelligence and cybersecurity professionals, both offensive and defensive, that are doing really crucial things to deal with very well-resourced adversaries. Making massive changes to those organizations without proper oversight and expertise from technical professionals who know those specific areas can have unforeseen impacts on both, again, the threat model that we're facing, the immediate threats that we face as a nation, and also our capabilities to respond to those threats. So that includes removing documentation, that includes our relationships with other nations, and it includes the professional people who have experience in dealing with those threats. And I'll leave it at that.
Thank you.
I had gathered and had discussed some with Erica how, along with numerous other words that were just being taken from usage in various federal agencies, privilege was one of those words. And I had noticed you commenting that privileged access is a term in information security, and that I mean, the analogy with a hammer to a glass window is very apt there. Thank you.
Yes, privilege escalation, privileged access. Privilege is just a word that's used very frequently in both offensive and defensive cybersecurity. And again, just there needs to be a modicum of caution used in modifying our national defense apparatus. You could lose absolutely critical documentation on how to defend our networks by removing that word across a large swath of documentation, and it would have nothing to do with the use of the word in other discussions in a social context.
Right.
Can I ask you a little bit about sandworm and salt typhoon?
When we're talking about like Volt Typhoon, we're talking about long-term building capacity to attack networks in the future, to pull data from them in current times through the espionage element, but also do reconnaissance and foothold building to be able to potentially tamper with those environments in the future. So again, well-resourced adversaries who have been able to conduct, they have industrial attack capability. They have that ability to impact, kinetic, physical, critical infrastructure systems. And what they're doing currently is they are building footholds in critical infrastructure in people or organizations, nations that they might want to target in the future. And they are building knowledge of those environments so that they can tamper with these tremendously complex industrial environments. What the reason why they're doing that is they're lowering their barrier to entry in the future. They want to be able to quickly launch attacks in the future. And industrial attacks against critical infrastructure in general are complex. They take knowledge of systems. Industrial systems, like, say, a train or a power plant, are made to be resistant to faults. They're made to be safe for people to use. They have multiple layers of safety controls and redundancies so that they don't fail and hurt people all the time. Adversaries who want to attack critical infrastructure have to gain a lot of knowledge to learn how these systems function in every individual instance and how to evade those safety controls, those mechanical controls, et cetera. That's why these state adversaries, like the ones you mentioned, are trying to do that long-term intrusion. It's very expensive. It requires expertise. It requires long-term, careful espionage into networks and building of footholds across multiple organizations and multiple portions of the US infrastructure. But that's the reason why they're doing it. It's because it's hard to do something specific. And there's certainly an espionage element there. They certainly want data on US citizens and the way that the US infrastructure operates in general. But There's that foothold building is so that it takes a few days to do something really catastrophic instead of taking a year to do something catastrophic. And they've found, as countries, those states that are relatively hostile to the US and our peers and our allies, what they've found really effective is spending the money in advance. So they have the resources and the personnel, the massive teams of computer hackers to spend years building giant databases of information and building really good intrusions into these environments, so that, again, if there's a geopolitical reason, if there is a election related reason for them to do something, they can do it relatively quickly without any problems.
And the final few minutes, are there any thoughts you'd like to share? I know that you're you're outspoken on various social issues. I support that. That was one of my interests in following your account and your work. Is there anything you'd like to share that we haven't covered, Lesley, that you think people should know, that's personal, that's not personal? What would you like people to know?
I'm outspoken on social issues because I have empathy and I don't have a choice. I would very much like to just focus on my work securing critical infrastructure every single day, but it's not the world that I live in right now. I am not a person, given my demographics, who can just ignore social issues. And I have friends who I can't ignore, and I care about other people around me who I don't necessarily know. I don't have a degree in social sciences or in anthropology or in social justice. That's not my career. My career is securing critical infrastructure, and my job is doing that. And I teach on it, and that's what I love doing. And the reason why I have to talk about social issues is because other people aren't. And I don't want people to die. That's why I have to spend time doing that, because other people who might have more privilege to talk about those things aren't talking about them. So that's it's not something that I wake up every morning and I want to do, talking about politics, talking about protecting queer people, talking about getting young people into the field who don't necessarily look like hackers in the 90s. I have to do that because other people aren't. It's my obligation as a decent human being trying to leave the world better, and also to protect myself. So that's all I have to say about that.
That's
And
plenty.
And
That's
that
plenty.
is very touching, because I think, especially right now, we're living obviously in a time that no one had anticipated we would be living through. And I had a conversation last night with a group of people that I know, because we all want to know what we can do to make things better for other human beings, and to try to move through what we're going through right now in the best, safest way possible. But to me, I feel it is important to speak out and to speak on behalf of people that need to be protected. And so I really commend you for doing that. And I know it's not an easy thing to do. What advice do you have for other people who are maybe unsure right now in this political climate, if they should sit back and kind of fly under the radar, or if they should speak up?
Your threat model. We come back to your threat model, your
Okay.
personal threat model. What is at risk for you? What is the actual threat to you as a person? Are you more privileged than other people in terms of the personal risk to yourself? What are you going to lose? What do you stand to lose if you don't do anything, or if nobody does anything? I mean, there are cases where people are in tremendous risk if they speak up. They could lose their job, lose their health care. They could be harmed by their family, and that's part of their threat model. But there's other people who are tremendously well posed to do really good action to help others. And I'd like to see more of them speaking up, instead of always the people who are in danger, or the people who have friends who are in danger. So it's up to us.
That's a great advice. I really wholeheartedly agree with that. And I hope that we can find, our collective voice. And I think it's also important to, people feel so isolated. It's important to create communities, like you do. You're shoring people up and you're giving people that strength to accomplish amazing things. And so I really appreciate that in everything that you're doing. And that is a great message for all of us.
Thank you so much. I really appreciate that.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'd like to echo my gratitude for the work you do on a regular basis in so many areas, as well as taking the time to talk with us today. The legendary Hacks for Pancakes, I'm just elated that you spent some time with us, and thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. And are there places that people can find you that you would recommend, on social media? I know things are changing in the social media landscape, but if people wanted to really follow your work, what would you recommend?
I'm on every social media platform except for X under Hacks for Pancakes. You can find me on Mastodon, Blue Sky, Threads, Instagram. I'm on all of those. I'm on LinkedIn. Definitely follow me. I try to cross post across all of those platforms since we're kind of spread out now.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. We appreciate you being here and teaching us all so much. Stay safe and thank you. I want to just thank everybody for listening to our show. I'm Erica Lukes here with my partner, Jack Brewer. You can go to expandingfrontiersresearch.org to check out our work and to help us with future projects. Thank you all. Stay safe, and we will catch you next time.